Welcome to the first of the series of brief videos that Chiara and David and I have prepared for you in anticipation of our reading of the poem in our meetings. We're looking forward to discussing the text together with you. Since we hope that you will all take the opportunity of this book club to read the entirety of the Inferno, the brief introductory videos titled Instructions for Use are intended to give you some basic tools for interpreting Dante's Inferno, which, like all literary classics, has unique characteristics that offer a key to begin to unlock the work's significance. To begin with, there is a fundamental structural feature that needs to be kept in mind as you read the Divine Comedy, beginning with the first cantica or canticle, the Inferno. I refer to the distinction between Dante the pilgrim and Dante the author, in other words, the effective author of the poem. There's a fundamental difference in perspective between Dante the pilgrim, a character in the poem, and the Dante who is writing the poem. As you will notice immediately, it's actually more complicated than just this simple dichotomy, since Dante represents himself in the poem as not only the pilgrim on the journey through hell, but also as the writer who is writing the poem, a character in its own right, who has returned from the journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise to write down the experience of the pilgrim for the purpose of leading the reader and all mankind to salvation. Now, take the first lines of the poem in the Hollander translation on this slide. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura che la diritta via era smarrita. Ai quanto a dir qual era e cosa dura esta selva selvaggia e aspra e forte che nel pensier rinnova la paura. Here we can see easily the distinction between Dante the pilgrim as character in the story in the first tercet, and in the second tercet, the character of the writer Dante, who having completed the journey is writing it down. Note also in the first line, perhaps the most famous line of poetry ever written, the switch between the first person singular I and the plural we, as in our life. It's Dante's journey, but he's also talking about the journey that we are all on as humans, the journey of our life. As Robert Hollander writes in his commentary, which we highly recommend, it's available in Doubleday, Random House books, mixing plural and singular first persons is a sign of the poet's desire to make his reader grasp the relation between the individual and the universal, between Dante and all humankind. His voyage is meant to be understood as ours as well. Now, you can see the two Dantes very nicely illustrated. If I can get the slide. Here we go. You can see the two Dantes illustrated in these two 14th century manuscript illustrations. On the left, Dante at his desk writing the poem, and on the right, Dante encountering the three beasts and Virgil, who comes to his aid. Now, to illustrate the distinction between the character of the pilgrim Dante and that of the author and their different perspectives, consider the tercet in this slide from the second canto of the Inferno that we are planning to discuss in our first meeting. Dante is fearful and protests to Virgil that he is unworthy of the journey that Virgil proposes that he undertake. In fact, the pilgrim compares himself to Aeneas, who had traveled to the underworld according to Virgil's Aeneid as part of his journey to found Rome, which was destined to become the seat of the papacy, and St. Paul, who ascended to heaven according to the New Testament. The pilgrim exclaims, "But why should I go there? Who allows it? I am not Aeneas, nor am I Paul. Neither I nor any think me fit for this. And so if I commit myself to come, I fear it may be madness. You are wise, Virgil. You understand that what I cannot express. This is a very good illustration of the structural importance of the distinction between Dante the Pilgrim and Dante the writer that I would like to get across in this video. I hope you'll bear in mind this distinction in reading the poem. Consider how the perspective of the pilgrim, what the pilgrim says or does, can be distinguished from the perspective of Dante, the author. For here, Dante, in this passage from Inferno 2, the pilgrim is protesting. I am not Aeneas, I am not Paul. But the author, Dante, wants us to understand exactly the opposite. Dante is a new Aeneas. He is a new Paul. One of the most interesting and challenging things about reading Dante is distinguishing between the perspectives of the character Dante, including the character of Dante the writer writing the poem, and the author Dante. Can you find other significant examples of this structural characteristic of the poem in the first two introductory cantos? 1 and 2 are a diptych, or a pair of cantos that together serve as an introduction to the entire comedy. Let's plan to discuss examples of this feature of the poem in our first meeting.